Welcome, everybody. It's just wonderful to have you here, to be with you in person, and to be with Kevork Mourad. This, as was described, is very much a sharing of our foray into collaborating with one another. We're going to share with you kind of 4 vignettes, ideas that we've been fleshing out in the last few days here, and that we hope will go on further, have a life. And so we're going to kind of play, chat, and so on. But before we even start, just a brief intro. I'm sure I've met some of you, but perhaps not all of you. My name is Maeve Gilchrist. I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland. My mother's Irish, my father's Scottish, and this is my instrument of the Celtic Isles, the Celtic harp. I grew up calling it the clarsach. And this instrument has brought me from traditional music in Scotland and Ireland over the ocean here to America. I've been here about 18 years now, and it's really been my door to all kinds of collaborations. I met Kevork through my work with the Silkroad. I perform in a variety of projects and so on, but it's really moments like this, getting to make magic, as you'll hear Kevork talk about later on, that make me so grateful for having picked up this instrument in the first place. So that's me. Kevork, do you want to say a little something before we begin?
I'll introduce myself too. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kevork Mourad. I was born in Syria, Aleppo, Syria. My ancestors, my grandparents, they arrived to Syria as refugees 100 years ago. And we made Syria as our home. We thought that it's going to be there forever. This home is going to stay forever. And unfortunately, 11 years ago, most of the Armenians also was forced to leave with some of the Syrians too. So these things we've been seeing even recently in the news, what's happening in Ukraine. Unfortunately, this history is always repeating itself. And my hope is art somehow makes a big impact and somehow it stops these atrocities. And not too long ago, I discovered that I'm actually part also Assyrian, which is interesting. My father told me not too long ago. I don't know why he was hiding that. So in the work that you're going to see, I kind of embedded a little bit of Assyrian influences, which is like 3,000-4,000 year old culture. So it's kind of blend of many things, like the Armenians and the Irish and a little bit of Assyrians and a little bit of you. It's going to be inside too. So we're going to share this residency. And thank you so much to Yonja making this incredible, and the Holy Cross too, to invite us and make this residency. Without this residency, I don't think we can do this. And let's see. Thank you.
Before we embark on this first vignette, just a little bit background on how we found a connection between our 2 cultures from 2 very different parts of the world. When the pandemic first hit, the Silkroad Ensemble gave out some grants for new duo performances, virtual performances. This was kind of, before Zoom was a thing. And I reached out to Kevork. I had become familiar with his work, and I loved it. I mean, the ethereal nature of what Kevork does. I remember I was reading W.G. Sebald at the time, and I'm a huge fan of his writing. And what I love so much about his writing is I feel like I'm experiencing the words and the narrative through this dreamy gauze. And I felt like when I viewed Kevork's work, there was a very similar feeling. And I called him up, and we had the time to talk in a way that we never would have beforehand. And we'll chat more about this, but a couple of things that we touched on was this remarkable similarity between early Christian artifacts in Scotland, Ireland, and in Armenia, particularly early medieval artifacts. The most famous of the illuminated manuscripts is the Book of Kells. these richly illustrated gospels. And Kevork shared with me very similar illustrations, stone crosses similar to the high crosses of Ireland. And I had no notion that there was this connection on these different continents. And from there, we started exploring other subjects, the idea of time, the idea of us being still while time was moving, something very interesting to me as a musician. We live through time, we all do, by the clock. But I also manipulate time. When I'm thinking about groove, when I'm thinking about polyrhythm, I'm engineering time in a different way. So we started thinking about the cycle of life. We started thinking about cultural connections. And we just started to explore our collective imagination. So in this first piece that you hear, we're just starting to create a sound world. You'll hear various sounds, which I kind of think of as our world. We're trying to welcome you into our space. We'll see the harp, we'll hear the art, but just a vignette of what will be.
a little bit about it? What do you think?
Yeah.
What was happening in your mind when you wrote this piece?
Well, the idea of time was very much at the beginning of this theme, and I'm thinking of it as a theme in the last 3 days being here. What I've taken is some of the ideas that Kevork and I came up with when we did that first collaboration. It was just a 6-minute long piece. And a lot of these melodic ideas are things that we've taken from that and started to flesh out. So in this piece, to me this is the pulse of life. This is the clock ticking. And I imagine it appearing in different shapes and forms, or in different ranges throughout the whole piece. But this constant reference to time. With a lot of the music, I spent the last few days thinking about it for more instruments than just me. So writing for the Armenian duduk, that wonderful wind instrument. To me it sounds quite like a bombard from Brittany. I'm sure Kevork has a different description, but a wonderful, very specific wind sound, and also a violin with a low C string. So bringing those instruments in will give opportunity to just expand the color world. But when I think of ideas like this reference to time, I'm imagining it occurring in all the different instruments. Same with, like, I whistled, Kevork sung. We heard an archival recording of Komitas, the Armenian monk who was so responsible for the preservation of Armenian folk music. And again, Kevork, you should talk more about that. But all of these things are elements which I imagine in some shape or form being manifested on different voices as well. But really, like, to me, this whole piece, it doesn't feel like a composition as much as a sound world, you know, just an introduction to the world that we're going to expand upon, and a little bit of the clock, a little bit of the melody from both parts of the world, some sounds. I love the sound of Kevork's pen on the page. It's so evocative. I love Kevork singing. It doesn't need to be this performative thing. It's you know. But he's got career changes in mind.
I know. I'm thinking about it.
But it's the same way that my mother would have sung to me when I was going to sleep. It's just part of the soundscape of our lives in both cultures.
Yes, also what's interesting about the choice, because she chose to play Gomidas's voice. That's the actual voice is recorded in 1912, just 3 years before he went mad, because he studied in Germany, so he was already well known in Europe. So during the massacre, they kind of left him alone. So they didn't kill him, but he saw his friends were killed. So 3 years later, when he went mad, he didn't speak a word. From 1915 until 1938, he was in asylum in Paris. So this is probably one of the last thing that he did. And I didn't say anything to Maeve. She chose this by herself. And I was kind of, this is the magic, where without speaking about this idea that she chooses, and I'm here to kind of explain why she chooses this. And when I put those stones, which was the Assyrian stone that I created, it somehow matched that ancient sound. And that happened, by the way, just like magic. We didn't elaborate or talk about it much.
Shall we do number 2?
Yeah.
We'll go on to the second. We're thinking of this as kind of existing in a variety of movements. It started out by being, the idea was 3 movements, which was the way the original collaboration was divided. But now it's kind of morphing, as these things do. But the section that we're going to share now, when I started writing it, I was thinking of the 2 lines interweaving to create that Celtic knotwork, or the knotwork that you see on the Armenian hashkars, which are so similar to the high crosses of Ireland. But also, again, the idea of these lines representing time and the irrepressible nature of time as it moves forward, which has just so been on all of our minds in the last couple of years as it's been taken out of our hands a little bit. So we'll start with a kind of mellow melody on my end, and then hopefully you'll hear these two voices starting to connect. Perhaps it's these two voices and beginning to dance with one another. And we'll do a hard end. I don't envision it eventually having a hard end, but for now we'll have a hard end. We'd love to answer questions and help that shape the hour as well, so feel free at any point to jump in. sorry, discussion. For the third one. Yeah. So we're the visuals that I just saw were what I thought were going to be with the next piece, but they weren't great. So now I'm thinking, well, what shall we do for the next one? But I guess it doesn't matter because, you know,
so this is the
something will
fascinating
work.
thing about the magic. When we talk about magic, so what she inspired me to do is this idea of creating this urgency. Because of what's we're seeing and hearing in the news, I want to somehow create this fire and deportation and the refugees and all that. Somehow, in my mind, we have all night to explore this, but I wanted to kind of create it before that, and she was on top of it. She kind of, I don't know, amazing.
Hanging on by a thread. Are there any questions so far about anything? Yes.
I think magic really is the word for what's going on here. I'm staring at this and I'm seeing things that weren't there before, and where do they go and how did we make them? I'm just in awe of what I'm seeing, and I love some explanation for how the hearing, what I'm hearing goes with what I'm seeing. Which comes first? Have you heard each other, or have you seen each other doing things before you came in tonight? I don't know how to explain this.
Do you want to go first, Kevork?
I think I collaborate quite often with amazing, talented musicians, but I don't think all the time I can find this collaboration easy, because when people come to collaborate, they also come with their idea of what to expect. Sometimes that kind of interferes with kind of this smooth collaboration. But this is probably our second time we're collaborating, but the first one was very quick when we did the Tanglewood project, which was very brief. But here I'm learning about her. So basically, I'm kind of making my hand part of the music, and the music actually is doing most of this stuff here you see in the live. I had the idea what I'm doing, but not exactly. So I give credit to her playing. So I think, thank you. So that's basically it. But we can talk about the technology later. That's another level. I have a MIDI controller here, switches the signal between live and animation, drawing, camera, computer. So those are like not important. The important thing is how kind of we have this conversation together.
And similar to Kevork, I mean, I also have themes in place for different sections. You know, like we've talked roughly about the arc of each of these movements in a way that's open enough for it to have different forms of life, you know, with other musicians, just with the two of us. But for example, that last one, I had a notion of the beginning, this mellow feeling. I knew there was going to be some figures. It felt more ethereal to me. I had a sense that we were going to build it, and I had some figures, you know, in each of my hands that I know I can go to. But from there, I'm just watching, and I'm trying to feel the energy and respond. And how I often feel these collaborations end up, as they evolve and mature, is often kind of shapes will take place, but there's still an openness within that structure, which is what makes it so exciting to perform. You know, it's this combination of structure and an improvisation. And for something as a harpist that I'm interested in is using my two hands as separate voices, kind of textural explorations based on the eight fingers that I use. when I'm playing the harp. And this lends itself so beautifully to a project like this, where we're thinking about interweaving characters and parts, because it's just this constant layering, and I'm often layering with my hands. I'm occasionally adding some effects, and Kevork is layering with this combination of pre-made and live drawing, and the way that, and even between the pre-made and the live drawing, he's improvising the way that he's combining the two. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. Any other questions before we go on? Yes.
Just following up on that, something I wanted to ask you this morning. Do you have a sense at any point of who's leading while you're doing this? Does that go back and forth, or are you just each kind of forging ahead? And how does that feel, I guess, is the question.
People really want to know that there's a leader. But I mean, kind of like we were talking with Bill's class earlier today about the idea of true improvisation. And I feel like when it's really getting to a place as a collaboration and as an improvisation, I'm happy with, hopefully there really is no leader, or at least it feels incredibly democratic in the way that we're moving forward. And I think in this stuff, it's still new enough that we're sharing ideas, and I'll perhaps be moved by something I see on the screen, and perhaps in that instant, Kevork is leading. But it can shift, the next second, I can take it a different direction, and hopefully, and he is, because he's a musician as well, he's listening enough that he can come with me. But it's hard to let go of this idea of, it's hard for me as well as a musician to let go of this idea of not either being a leader or a follower. And it's a really freeing exercise if I can let myself go completely. Yeah.
Third section.
Yeah. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, with the fire?
No, what? Just do it.
Just, okay.
Just do the way you were
Just okay.
planning.
So this section, the melody that you're going to hear, I wrote not with the harp in mind. I was imagining the duduk and the fiddle kind of taking off in this triumphant feeling. But we'll give it a whirl. Kevork, will you tell us a little bit about your setup and what exactly you're doing?
The setup is very simple, absolutely simple. So I have this wireless device here. It changes back and forth. And I have a software made for this purpose. Actually, I save the animations in, and with push of a button appears. And also, I love watercolor effect, so the effect is digitally done here. So I can trigger it, I can change the amount. And also, I love the idea of blurry hand, so I changed that here because it felt like more dreamy and more artistic than to think about I'm painting. So it just becomes like a one more element, like a dancer almost in the piece. But the most important thing is this is a tool that I invented 20-some years ago. I put paint in this and I squeeze. And while it's wet, I can just shape it. And all of my work, including the animation, is done with this.
It's so magical in itself. I wonder if our last musical offering for the day should be this little hymn. This will be the first time we've really played this together, so an improvisation of sorts, but it's a melody that I came up with yesterday. I was thinking about the situation in Ukraine and how somebody, an artist my age, could be being handed a gun right now. So this is just a little melody that we'll reflect on right now.